debt ceiling. And by the way, we just minted $3 trillion coins or one $5 trillion coin. I mean, who knows? But I'm with you, Steve. I think it's the way to go. Thanks a lot for the call. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us. Otherwise, it's not a democracy. It becomes an autocracy. It becomes a dictatorship. It becomes, Ron DeSantis' dream. Oh, my. So get out there. Get active. Tag. You're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you. Stay safe.
Listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like leaving your laptop exposed at the coffee shop table when you run to the bathroom. I mean, most of the time you're probably fine, but what if one day you come out of the bathroom and your laptop is gone? Here's the thing. Your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 a person selling personal information on the dark web. And every time you connect to an unencrypted network at a cafe, hotel, or airport, any hacker on the same network can gain access to your personal data, unless you use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. Just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. ExpressVPN works on all devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure on the go. So secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/Tom. That's expressvpn.com/THOM, and you get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. expressvpn.com/Tom. That's expressvpn.com/Tom.
The David Pakman Show.
One of the claims that's often used to say the border is open is you will hear things like, we're catching so many people at the border because Biden opened it. If we are catching people, if we are stopping people, if we are taking people into custody, by definition, the border is not open.
The David Pakman Show, weekday evenings at 10 on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
We are the 25%. That's a quarter of all Americans. Over 61 million people with a disability. Our differences make us 100% unique. Just like you. 100% creative, passionate, determined, and proud. We are the 25%. And we want a world where everyone is 100% included. Mr. Seals Disability Services. Change the way you see disability. We are the 25.org.
This is AP News. I'm Rita Foley.
Okay, I'm up on
This morning,
StreamYard.
Fitch, the credit ratings agency, is warning the nation's AAA credit rating may take a hit because of the debt limit crisis. It's put the U.S. on what it calls a ratings watch negative. It blames the political squabbling over lifting the debt ceiling. Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis kicked off his presidential campaign last night in a Twitter announcement that didn't go exactly as planned. The AP's Jackie Quinn.
Republican Governor Ron DeSantis launched his campaign in a special Twitter Spaces feed, criticizing President Biden.
He lacks vigor, flounders in the face of our nation's challenges, and he takes his cues from the woke mob.
But there were technical problems that led to starts and stops, audio glitches. Donald Trump tweeted, the DeSantis Twitter launch is a disaster. But still, DeSantis says they raised $1 million in the first hour after the announcement. I'm Jackie Quinn.
Pastor Brooks is on.
Okay, Pastor Brooks.
The death of Tina Turner,
And I'm up on StreamYard.
Good morning, good morning, good morning.
Good morning, how are you, hon?
Say that again.
Oh, no, I was letting him know that
great.
I'm up on StreamYard.
In a written statement, President Biden called Turner...
On StreamYard. I like that. That's what we use, too.
Former
Absolutely.
President Obama writes, Turner's a star whose light will never fade.
Sounds great, Miss Jackson.
Okay, great. And you could hear Pastor Brooks?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, we'll have a great show.
Death,
I was a huge fan of Tina Turner.
calling it incredibly sad news.
And it is a massive loss to the communities that loved her.
Sagar Magani, Washington.
Are you traveling for the holiday? The AAA predicts that 37 million Americans will drive at least 50 miles from home this holiday weekend. 10 million travelers expected at the airports. This is AP News. Now to Russia, Ukraine, and company business.
Global companies are finding it's not so simple to leave Russia. Others are quietly staying put. More than a year after many companies left Russia in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, something became clear. Leaving Russia was not as simple as it might have seemed. Increasingly, Russia has put hurdles in the way of companies that want out, requiring approval by a government commission and imposing painful discounts and taxes on prices. Feeling the push and pull between Western sanctions and outraged public opinion on one side, and Russia's efforts to discourage and penalize departures on the other, some companies are staying put. Meanwhile, Russian consumers are not feeling a big difference, as many companies that have left are taken over by Russian owners, providing almost identical products. I'm Karen Chamas.
And I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now, your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. Skies will become mostly sunny here for today with a high in the mid-60s. Winds out of the northeast around 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting as high as 20. Tonight, mostly clear, low near 47. By Friday, sunshine, high of 71 degrees. Saturday, plenty of blue skies and sun, a high of 76. Sunday, sunshine, high of 79, and Monday, sunny, high of 83 degrees. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 51.
Finding great people to hire is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's pretty difficult, right? Well, ZipRecruiter has mastered finding a needle in a haystack. So they take it to the next level. They make hiring so simple that it's like finding a needle in a needle stack. And that's why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. Here's what it's like to use ZipRecruiter. They have so many qualified candidates that it's easier to find the right ones for your roles. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. That's a lot of needles. So how do they do it? ZipRecruiter's powerful technology sends you candidates who are a great match for your job, and you can even invite your top choices to apply. So if you want less hay and more needles, head to ZipRecruiter.
ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. At ZipRecruiter.com/free. That's ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Stop your grinding. Are you waking up in the morning with a sore jaw, headaches, ringing in your ears, all because you're grinding and clenching your teeth at night? That's exactly what was going on with me. I ended up going to a dentist, and he wants to charge over $600 for a night guard. That's when I found the Brux Night Guard. You mold it at home to the top or bottom teeth. Other mouth guards go all the way to the back, which allows the back teeth to touch. This is where most of the grinding and clenching occurs. The Brux Night Guard redirects the bite force away from the back teeth, reducing jaw pain while still protecting the teeth. This unique design is what makes Brux Night Guard different from all other traditional grind guards. Order your Brux Night Guard today and get 10% off plus free shipping. Go to BruxNightGuard.com and enter the code BRUX91. That's BRUX91. Stop your grinding with Brux Night Guard.
Because facts matter. You are listening to WCPT 820.
Don't you wish your life came with a warning app?
Stop. That dog does not want to be petted.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens.
Move your coffee cup away from your computer.
Oh, no.
So you can have more control.
3 minutes, Miss Jackson.
Okay, thank you.
Your boss by mistake.
Uh-oh. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning, the cap is loose on that ketchup.
Ugh. Don't wait. You have the power to change the outcome. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Okay. I can't hear anything. Oh, okay, great. Now I can. Great.
And every day, hear me as I call out to you. Take my hand. Lift me up as I lift up others. Welcome me home, father, mother, sister, brother, son, daughter. Hear us now. Alone we stood, divided we fell. No longer. Now we choose to make the connection. Our new mission lies within. Visit maketheconnection.net to learn more.
Social Security is with you through life's journey. Get to know us at
1 minute.
socialsecurity.gov. We are there, day one, with baby names and a gift that lasts a lifetime. We are there as you grow, protecting you and those you love. We are there when you get your first job, helping you to save for the future. We are there when you marry your sweetheart, to help secure your new life together. We are there if the unexpected happens, to help you see life from a new perspective. We are there.
All right, let's have a great show.
Let's have an amazing show.
Absolutely.
20 seconds.
I know that we will. I always feel great when you're here.
When you lose,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
help
Let's
make
get
sure
to it.
You will be all right. We are with you through life's journey. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow.
Okay.
Get to
Here we
know
go.
us
Here we
and
go.
see what you can do online.
10 seconds.
Security.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Because
Stand by.
matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Getting just a little bit of feedback. We're working that out. It is Thursday, May 25th, 2023. Verge of Memorial Day, everybody. That's the kickoff to the summer. Are you ready? Oh, I love it. I am Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want you to meet my morning stars, Laura and Daryl and Barbara Bacon, holding it down for Oak Park. Yes, in the house. I'm sending you so much love today, girl. And Donnie D. and Andre. And oh my goodness, it was so great to have Linear Bob on with us yesterday, and Sister Chapearl. And Michael Ann, one of the founding members of the Morning Star crew. Sending you all so much love, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. Hey everybody, let's talk about this debt ceiling. Congress is going on vacation. I mean, they have been released by the Speaker of the House. They will be back after the Memorial Day holiday. June 1st is upon us. Has the deal already been cut? Have we already been cut? One thing that's not been cut is the Pentagon budget. And in fact, the GOP is fighting to increase it. No, they're not fighting to increase it. They're going to. So what do you think about that as you're looking at social programs? I mean, student loan debt, all of these things that could help the average American. Well, that's off the table. But what stays on the table is the Pentagon. So I want to know what your thoughts are. They are 62% of our budget. Is that extreme to you? I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. And, of course, Dr. Max Wolf will be talking to us about this debt ceiling. And will the 14th Amendment be employed? Will any extraordinary measures be taken just to avert this disaster? Not to mention the fact that be very careful about the readings of these polls. Number one, you have to find out how polls are taken. Because as you can see from these presidential polls, even someone you might be thinking about is being excluded from the questions when they call you, right? Like they're not mentioning Robert Kennedy at all. They're even pulling up Andrew Cuomo as a candidate. He's not even running, and he was pushed out of office in New York. That having been said, it doesn't exclude him from running, but he's been kind of like in some kind of gray area in the political landscape. He shouldn't be, I don't think, but that's the way it's been. And now they're saying that, well, Americans want cuts, but they also want the debt deal to be sealed. They want to lift the debt ceiling. No, if you really dig down in these polls, Americans want the debt ceiling to be lifted. First, isolate that. Then they want spending cuts. They want to trim the fat, if you will. But the fact that's not being trimmed is that military budget, and we need to talk about that, everybody. And remember, a fourth of the budget goes to military contractors. It doesn't even go to the troops. On the edges of many of these bases all across the country are payday loan centers because our troops' families are catching the devil trying to go from payday to Monday. They don't have enough money to live. Enlistees don't make any money. So you say you love the troops, you don't even pay them. Let's talk about that, everybody. Oh, yeah, Pastor Brooks. I mean, really? You pay them poverty wages? And they're the ones who are fighting the wars? I mean, are you serious right now? No. Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. And you better get a housing on that base. Because if you don't get housing on that base, you can't afford to live anywhere. And even, this is ridiculous. We really need to ask ourselves what we're asking people to do. And is military service the only form of service in the United States? Don't you think your teachers serve? Let the garbage workers go on strike. Think about it, the frontline workers. They serve too. We've got to expand our sense and the definition of service. So let's get to some of these headlines, everybody. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced his 2024 presidential campaign on Twitter Spaces, Twitter's audio-only platform, but a series of technical difficulties and a waning audience on the app opened the door for criticism from both sides of the political aisle. But the fact is, he had so many people who were trying to hear his announcement that the system crashed. It crashed. It was hosted by owner Elon Musk and tech entrepreneur David Sachs. It was delayed, cut a few minutes, and on and on and on. But 250,000 people ended up listening from different accounts, and it was just, what do you think? He's now no longer a hypothetical candidate. He is a real candidate. How will he do? How will he fare in a debate against against Donald Trump? What do you think about that? Donald Trump is tough. Call me at 773-763-9278. A new, quote, revolution, close quote, could rock Russia, according to this CNN report, if its war effort in Ukraine continues, the chief of private military group Wagner said. He said he gave a scathing assessment of Moscow's military readiness in an interview with a pro-Russian blogger. We'll see, everybody. The House will recess today, even as the tense debt ceiling negotiations between the White House and top Republicans continue. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise says members will be called back to the chamber within 24 hours' notice if a deal is reached. Negotiators for the White House and House GOP and House GOP met again yesterday. We'll see how all of this goes, everybody. Several members of the far-right Oath Keepers are facing sentencing for their convictions related to the January 6, 2021 Capitol. The first sentencing hearing for militia leader Stuart Rhodes, convicted of seditious conspiracy, is scheduled for today. In Chicago, it's going to be cool today. Might reach 60 degrees, but it will be partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, a nice warm 77 degrees, partly cloudy. In the NBA, the Heat will be playing the Celtics. Will the Heat be able to pull it out? We will see, because the Celtics are fighting to keep, dare I say it, hope alive. In the NHL, the Panthers did it, everybody. They did it. They won over the Hurricanes. 4-3, everybody. They are heading to the Stanley Cup Finals. Wow, congratulations. In the WNBA, the Lynx will be playing the Mercury tonight. And in Major League Baseball, the Twins 7, the Giants 1, White Sox 6, the Guardians 0, and the Cubs 4, and the Mets 2. Pastor Darius Brooks, it's always a joy to hear your voice of inspiration on these Thursday mornings. Talk to me, of course, the director of the Tommies. And we're very, very excited. They're going to be honoring Ramsey Lewis, the great Ramsey Lewis, in Millennium Park, of course, on June 22nd. And many of you might or might not know, I grew up next door to Mr. Lewis and his first wife, Mrs. Geraldine Lewis. They had 7 kids, beautiful family. And Darius, I'm going to open up. Frayne Lewis.
I'm gonna be there.
I know you. Of course, you're going to be there. You were one of Ramsey Lewis's favorite artists, and I'm going to open up by singing some jazz. So I can't wait to see you all there, June 22nd, honoring the great Ramsey Lewis. And of course, yesterday, we lost an icon, the Queen of Rock and Roll, Tina Turner. But boy, oh boy, did she leave quite a legacy, not just a musical legacy, but a social legacy. And we thank God for her life today. Interestingly enough, when you saw her performances, she stayed she really kept the same act that she was known for with Ike Turner. Whatever their troubles in their personal relationship, and clearly they've been documented, the fact is they were an iconic couple, an iconic musical group. Indeed, the first person to record a rock and roll record was Ike Turner. He's one of the pioneers of rock and roll, so it's ironic that he would launch and shape queen of rock. And so we thank God for that. We thank God for that. So, Pastor Darius Brooks, we love you and Grace Central Church. We love you, love you, love you. Talk to me about how we can get food before you give us the spiritual food very quickly. How can we come and get some food? Because a lot of people are needing this food today. What days are you serving? Are you passing out these groceries?
Tuesdays, every Tuesday from 5 till 7, and every Wednesday from noon till 2. Wednesdays are for the seniors, and 5 till 7 is for the general public. We serve 8 different townships. So we get 3 to 5 worth of food to every family, and we do it every week. So if you know anybody who needs food, Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street,
New caller,
Illinois, just go to gracecentral.com every Tuesday from 5 till 7, and every Wednesday from noon till 2. Santita, great word today. Great word today. Often when you don't hear God's word or trust Him for direction and guidance, we have to get our information from someone else. Psalms 34 and 6 and 8, as we quickly run, this poor man called and the Lord heard him. He said, out of his troubles, He saved him out of all of his troubles. The angels of the Lord encamp around those who fear Him, and He delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And here's the part that's most important about this scripture, Santita. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in this, or in Him. Not just God is good and that He could save you from troubles, and those who respect Him, not only can He deliver, He's done it. He does it today. He's not a person that He survived. Santita, He says, blessed is the one who takes refuge in this, or in His word. Santita, if I had to use for a thought,
Dr. Knighton is on.
I question my faith when it comes to God. I question my faith when it comes to God. Without God's rightly divided word in the world and how the world operates, one is drugged with the cares of this life. We try to find ways to fix things, people, places, and things, putting and trusting everything outside of God's word, not a criticism, just an observation. Drug people are not bad people. They just want to find the next high, or when things are not going the way they want, they try to find another way to fix it, the next opportunity or the next thing, not comprehending that God already has this thing scripted. It's already scripted, Santita. I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Santita, with God, it's the purpose stuff, not the surface stuff. You better write that down. In the Word of God, we have different writers. Peter shares a lot in the Bible. Paul shares a lot. But David makes things simple. So one who reads can relate, because David had experienced that God's Word is often and always in or for a due season, so that one can use it in time of need. And see, we never called on God when we got things together. It's only, yeah, we call on God. As I run on to a close, and see them. As I run on to a close, the Word of God is so crazy amazing that we trust Him with everything we got. We go from acorns to bread. And see, the acorns were good until they found out how good bread was. Santita, when it comes to God, we're to question our faith, because a lot of times, as crazy as things may look, God's outcome for us is so much better. I haven't seen neither have fear heard, neither have it entered into the heart of man, the things God has prepared for them that love him. And Peter, I didn't see the other side of the sweetness until I committed to his word. And that's when he said, oh, taste and see that I am good. I listened to you talking about Tina Turner. Tina Turner had to have God with all she's been through and still turned out being an icon of the world. And Peter, I got my doctor's degree the other day with a GED. You can't make this stuff up. People of God.
Absolutely.
I question my faith when it comes to God, because if I just deal with and I think I like and what I want, God says, wow, I got so much more for you. Whoever you are on this feed, question your taste and see if it's what God has for you versus what you think you want.
And amen. How can we work with you at Grace Central on Sunday?
Sunday, 10:30 till noon. We start on time and we end on time. And Santita, it's always an informative word that each person can leave the service and use it for their own personal, incredible life.
I love it. And I love you, Pastor Brooks. Have a wonderful you and the First Family and the Grace Central family. They're all First Families there. Have a great Memorial Day weekend. We'll be talking more about Memorial Day tomorrow, because Memorial Day was started by African Americans who'd just been freed from slavery. Yes, black people started Memorial Day. They saw that the Union soldiers had just been dumped in mass graves without any ceremony, in profound disrespect. They dug them up, buried them individually, and they had a ceremony, and that started Memorial Day. So we're going to be talking about that tomorrow and some of the activities between here in Chicago and Minneapolis, St. Paul. But we have got, now barbecues will be going on this weekend. And I got to ask Dr. Shanita Knighton, infection preventionist, registered nurse, about this. Because what I thought about Dr. Knighton? I wondered, as we talk about, how we're going to behave at these cookouts, at, when we're indoors, when we're outdoors. I can ask you about that in a hot second. I'm wondering about, are there certain precautions that you should take when you're preparing food?
Good morning, Santita. So that's the thing. So when we talk about the preparation of food just within itself, there's things, of course, one should do, especially when we're talking about dealing with raw food, and we think that some of these things are common sense, but mixing things that can be washed off with things that cannot be washed off, or where things can be infused. So, for example, having raw meat near, let's say, cheese that has no intention of also cooking because it's going to be served cold. Having raw items near, let's say, fruit, without being properly washed off, are reasons that people end up having, let's say, foodborne illnesses. So when you hear about, let's say, like salmonella outbreaks, and a lot of the outbreaks that occur, 9 times out of 10, they occur because someone is inappropriately handling food or mixing things that potentially can become contaminated without making sure that they're properly handled. It also could mean, for example, having, let's say, raw items on a counter and not properly sanitizing that counter before you would then prep the next item. I've seen oftentimes where someone will spray a counter down with the disinfectant, and then they'll put their food directly on that counter. You're supposed to put the disinfectant there, allow it to have its proper contact time on the surface, and then you're supposed to take a clean rag and wipe it down afterwards, so that way the chemicals from the disinfectant is not getting infused into your food. So oftentimes, when people end up sick, they don't recognize that they're missing that one key step. The key step is also very important for children that play with small toys. Adults might sanitize toys, but if you're not going behind after you sanitize and clean them down with, let's say, soapy water and then properly rinse them, then that kid is ingesting those chemicals as well. So my word when it comes to anything is that if you are going to disinfect, the step after disinfecting is making sure that you clean so you are not ingesting the chemicals from the disinfectant.
And what about keeping those countertops clean? right?
Exactly, because what we have to recognize is that with countertops, we prepare food there, we put dishes there, people touch them. They're high-touch surfaces, and high-touch surfaces can become contaminated. So it's important that they are washed down to ensure that there is no cross-contamination that occurs.
It's a lot to think about, everybody. Everybody, of course, meet her at Hey Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. HEYDRNINA. Hey Dr. Nina. So we're getting some more, really finding out what it is that we can do. There are a lot of things that we don't even think about. After you've sprayed down your surfaces, after you've cleaned, after you've done all this, think about the chemicals that are left behind. We don't think about that. So keep that in mind as we are moving into this Memorial Day weekend. It should be a glorious for you. And you want to be safe. Of course, we're always so grateful to have Dr. Shanina Knighton with us. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. Let's talk about what's getting cut and what's not getting cut for this debt deal. They say that they're far, far apart, but are they really? Well, one thing we do know, the GOP, they are pushing for increased Pentagon expenditures. Now, 62% of our budget goes to militarism and war. 62%. We're talking about not allowing you to get relief on student loan debt, cuts to security. I mean, on and on and on and on. The things that you need. But the GOP and many war hawks on the Democratic side want to increase the Pentagon budget. Why? Call me at 763-9278. And what will this debt deal look like if it goes through? And it just might. What will it look like to you, for you? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. July 15th through the 19th, the Rainbow Push Convention. We'll be talking about issues just like these. And call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-WCPT. Back in just a few minutes. I hear you, Robert. R.I.P. Ike and Tina Turner. And I hear you, Michael Ann. You said you wish that Ike had never existed for what he did to Tina. But, I tell you what, the last time in Chicago, family and I went to see her perform. And it was good to see her, and it was good that one of my dearest friends and professional colleagues, but she's just such a great singer, Lisa Fisher, the Grammy Award winner. Remember How Can I Ease the Pain? She sang back up for Luther and for the Rolling Stones. She's like their lead backup singer, all of that, but she's extraordinary. And Lisa was singing, and I wanted my friends who were back there working, who were doing her show. And what was fascinating to me was she had a tribute, and she included Ike Turner in the tribute. Many people don't know. I know he's a problematic. There's his story that I saw on Unsung, and it's because I know so many people who've worked with them. There is a lot to their story, a lot. And so I would want us to all be very, very careful. We don't know all of it. That having been said, she even conceded, had it not been for all that I went through, I would not be who I am now. You can't cherry pick life, everybody. Your every hurt as well as your every happiness you are. Every bit. Every bit. She also had a problem-plagued relationship with her mother. She said her mother never treated her well. So that was part of her material also. You don't know what drove her into a relationship in which she at one point felt protected, and then at another point it devolved into abuse. But if you talk to people who knew them, they had quite the contentious relationship on both sides. So let's be careful. And
Mr. McKee's on.
And thank you so much. Let us be mindful of the fact that I think it's something, and I got into trouble with the last radio station I was on when I, said, actually he recorded the first rock and roll, according to Wikipedia, the first person to record a rock and roll record was Ike Turner. And the person who absolutely shaped and her persona, Ike Turner. He did that. Now, you can say whatever you wish, but you can't take that from him. You can't take that from him. As we separate people and their personal problems from their artistic contributions, I think it's important for us to do that. So, call me. Let me know what you think about that too, because it's something that I do think about. But talk about a whole
Mr.
lot
Green's
of
on.
music. Who's with us now?
Mr. McKee and Mr. Green.
Okay.
Dr. Malvo has not answered. I'll continue to call.
Okay, great. She's out in California, so So Bryce Green. Hello, Dwight. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, morning.
Oh, okay. All right, everybody. Make sure you stay off mute, and let's get right to it. It's good to hear your voices today. Has you heard me
Good
go
to hear you
on?
too, Santita.
Oh, thank you, dear. Have you heard me talk about Ike and Tina Turner? I was over in on a trip in 1971. You remember this, Dwight, when we went to Soul, the Ghanaian independence celebration. They turned it into a movie. And Ike and Tina Turner were part of that celebration. So the Staple Singers were there.
30 seconds.
Roberta Flack, Eddie Harris, Les McCann, Carlos Santana, the Voices of East Harlem. Wilson Pickett was the headliner. It was quite interesting. And their relationship became legendary on that trip. I didn't quite know what I was, hearing about. But boy, oh boy.
10 seconds.
My parents would always have me step away from the table. Or they literally cover my ears.
Stand by.
Oh, stand by, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, as we are on the verge of Memorial Day weekend. Everybody, it is a joy to be with you today. I want to hear your thoughts. I'm going to come to Andre in a hot second. 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. What role do the wars in which America participates, what role are they having in our debt crisis? I mean, think about that, everybody. 62% of our budget, $1.1 trillion, 62% of the federal discretionary budget was spent on militarism and war just last year. And the GOP is pushing for an even larger Pentagon budget. And don't just put the GOP in it. I mean, you have war hawks in both parties. And the Pentagon, if they million more dollars, they might not even ask for it. They get it. So what is going on? I mean, as we're watching to that which, Dr. told us, if you would continue, if you want to elevate militarism over people, you're going to end up in spiritual death. And we've had more mass shootings than we've had days in the year. Think about that. So call me at 773-763-9278 as I go to Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting and Dr. D, Dwight McKee, brilliant sociologist. Let me go to Andre. Andre, what's on your mind, sweetie?
Good morning, Santita. How you doing? Thanks for having me again.
Oh, of course.
I like you and I enjoy your show. I want to put a different perspective on this debt ceiling that you mentioned initially. And what I see is that this is really nothing to do with the money aspect. It has something to do with the redistribution of wealth. You got some angry white folks out there that think that their money is being spent to take care of black people. It wasn't good enough to Bill Clinton left a $5 trillion surplus and balance the budget. That still wasn't good enough for Republicans. Well, if this is about the redistribution of wealth, what they don't realize is that blacks and the Democrats pay way more in taxes. Minorities pay way more in taxes. We send more tax money to Washington than Republicans do. So this Kevin McCarthy argument about cutting spending, that's strictly a Republican thing, not a Democrat, because over 80 million people vote for Biden, and we pay taxes too. So the taxes that we pay are funding our programs. Basically, none of the money that Republicans pay in taxes is going to fund our social program. We fund it ourselves with the high rate of taxes that we pay in the African-American community. That's the first thing I want to say to that. Santita, I'm going to quote something from Bishop T.D. Jakes. And Bishop T.D. Jakes says that, and this is in reference to sociology, which is the study of relationships. He says that there are people that are in relationships that have 80% of the things that they want in a relationship, but there's 20% missing. So they'll abandon that 80% and go for that 20%, only to realize that now they're 80% short. So what I'm suggesting is this. I heard a lot of piling on yesterday. Think about this for a minute. But Joe Biden has appointed black judges. He's appointed more black judges to the courts. He appointed the first black lady to the Supreme Court. He has the first black lady a vice president. He has given out free vaccines. A lot of the people that call and complain just have acknowledged the fact that a lot of those programs that Joe Biden did benefited them and their family. They got those stimulus checks. He signed the Juneteenth bill to recognize Juneteenth, the origin of that as the holiday and what have you. He's the executive order on background checks for guns, and the list goes on.
But so the vaccine program actually. Hold on, Andre. But let's be precise. Okay, the vaccine program started under Trump, and I just want to be very clear on that. He continued that, and quite frankly, I think we just have to also be, because the fact is what he's doing is really politics is quid pro quo. I certainly acknowledge his accomplishments. That having been said, I don't just celebrate them because you owe me, because I put you in. That's how politics works. I'm not going to kiss you on the lips for that. No. You owe me. I said I would give you my vote if you did this. Now I want justice in policing, and I want voting rights as an executive order. That's what I need. And I don't need to kiss you on the lips for that. I need you to do it, because that's why you got these votes. And I think we have to shift our thinking. So I'm not grateful for something that you owe me.
And I understand your perspective on that. Yesterday, Santita, I want to clear something up. You had a caller that made reference,
because I gotta pivot.
Okay. I think his name was Dwight. He made reference to the Enrique Tarrio, the Proud Boy. Oh, okay. Good morning to you, Dwight. But Enrique Tarrio is. Clear this up for me, because it's my understanding that Enrique Tarrio is an Afro-Cuban, and I never heard the reference to him as being made as a black man. So clear that up for me as where you draw the line is not referring to him as an Afro-Cuban, but referring to him as a black man.
Because Afro-Cubans
you all have a good day. I'll sit back and listen.
Yeah, but Afro-Cubans are black.
Yeah, but I understand that, but when you say it's a black man...
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question on is that we was talking about the Trumpites being racist and Trump being a racist, and that distinction is made by white people. In their mind, when they're racist, they say anybody dark, anybody black, anybody with 1 ounce of white blood or black blood is a black person, and they are racist against anybody who is black. And my point is that they're willing to accept blacks, even in leadership roles, if they buy the party line and if they buy into white supremacy. So that's not racism as much it is ethno superiority and ethnocentricity. Most of these white people that follow Trump are ethnocentric in their perception of the world. That is, they believe that Western civilization and white civilization is the greatest good, and anybody who is not subscribed to that is primitive and naive, and so the natives, blacks, anybody who don't co-sign on that, the Japanese, the Chinese, it's not just black people, it's any people who don't buy into the notion that Greek and Roman and Western civilization is a superior civilization. And that's what gives them the right not just to violate black people, but the Viet Cong, the Chinese, the Arabics, anybody who don't buy into the American way. That's a little different than racism. But if you're willing to buy into it, you can become Colin Powell, and they'll lift you up to co-sign that. If you're willing to buy into that, like Clarence Thomas, they'll lift you up and put you in the mix. You just have to buy into that.
Yeah, I mean,
you understand?
Well, but I understand.
Okay.
Okay, now Andre is pretty close to understanding what's going on, but the only difference is that this is not about the redistribution of wealth. This is locking into the redistribution of wealth that has already happened. The redistribution has already happened. They're just locking in the tax cuts so they can't look back on them. They want to lock into the redistribution of the wealth into the economy so there's no go back, and then play with our money at the bottom. So you're pretty right about that interpretation.
Thank you, Andre.
Okay, thank you, Dwight and Miss Santita. Y'all have a good day, and I'll keep listening to y'all.
Thank you, sweetie. Love you so much.
Okay, thank you.
You know, let me pivot to you.
Thank you, bro.
Bryce Green, fairness and accuracy in reporting. $1.1 trillion, 62% of the federal discretionary budget goes to militarism and wars. The GOP, they're pushing for an even larger Pentagon budget, even as we are on the verge of default. They're saying, no, we want spending cuts. And now the corporate media are reporting, well, Americans want spending cuts too. So what the GOP really, what they are doing is what Americans are wanting. No, Americans want the debt ceiling to be lifted first. Then they want to trim the fat. You all have to listen to very, very carefully. And you also have to figure out how the questions were asked in these surveys. Because if people know what's being cut and how it's going to impact how we live from day to day, this is not what they want, particularly when you see that 62% of our budget goes to militarism and war. I mean, talk to me, Bryce Green. I mean, 62% of the budget, $1.1 trillion. What?
One of the strangest things that happens in American discourse is people talking about the debt and fiscal responsibility.
Dr. Mebelson.
Like it's a family budget. And when they do that, they talk about, tightening your belt and making sacrifices. And that's usually from the Republican side. And what they're usually talking about there is cutting social programs for the very poor, cutting government regulatory powers, and increasing the leeway that's really given to corporations from the government. What they never talk about is cutting the number of military bases we have around the world, cutting the number of special forces units we have deployed around the world, ending lucrative contracts for Pentagon contractors, and actually successfully trying to audit the Pentagon to make sure that all these billions, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars are going to where we actually think they're going. But that's used as a bludgeon against the very poor. Now, we know that no one in Congress actually cares about the debt. That's pretty clear by the fact that they continue to raise this military spending. The only reason that you're hearing about the debt now, that you're hearing about this threat of default, is because Republicans and Democrats are letting them do it, want to cut social spending. They don't care about the debt. They don't care about how much the United States spends. The debt, the dollar, is really more of an accounting unit. And if we wanted to tomorrow, there's statutory powers to, mint a coin that could wipe out all the debt, that could fund the U.S. government. There are all sorts of accounting tricks that are available to the U.S. government, but the specter of default, the specter of the U.S. debt, is being used exclusively to attack the poor. And that really gets lost in the conversation around this. People talk about, a country needs to pay back its debts. We can't go into debt if we can't pay them back. But that's rhetorical flourishes. That's not actually what's going on here. That's not actually the way this money system operates. And the media system is pretty awful at telling people that.
They're shaping another narrative. They're saying you really want to be cut. If you knew what was being cut, you're being cut. You don't want that, particularly when you find out that 62%, which no corporate media are reporting. I found this in Common Dreams, and it is from a report, The Welfare State, How Funding for Militarism Compromises Our Welfare. This is from the National Priorities Project. $1.1 trillion, 62% of the federal discretionary budget was spent on militarism and war last year, and they want to get more money this year while we're on the verge of default. Dr. Julianne Malveaux has joined us, the economist, president emeritus of the Bennett College for Women, and the dean of ethnic studies at Cal State Los Angeles, and of course host of her own show. How can we hear your show, and when is it?
It's called Malveaux, exclamation point, because Santita, you know I am the exclamation point.
Yes.
On WPFW.org, Monday mornings, 9 a.m. I preempted this Monday because it's Memorial Day, but every other Monday you'll see me there, hear me there, and talking about politics, economics, gender, and race, and just how all these things collide. And so this conversation you're having about the military budget is so important because people don't get how much money we spend on militarism to the point that Congress 2 years ago actually wants to give them more than they asked for. You mean more than they asked?
In fact, they did.
But everyone else is being asked a cut. You're being asked to cut food stamps, Social Security, Medicare. But y'all, we just want to give you a few more $1 billion. Why not?
Well, let's back up. What is Kevin McCarthy? What are the GOP asking for Americans to cut? And how would these cuts, if enacted, how would they impact how we live from day to day, Dr. Malveaux?
Well, therein lies the question. If they they want a level, they don't want level, which I think Biden has proposed, which would be, from my perspective, punitive because population is going up. So if you're saying level, you're going to spend the same amount of money on more people. But they're actually asking for cuts. They haven't specified everything. They want a work requirement. So if you get SNAP, used to be called food stamps, they want to make you work. Here's the interesting thing about that, Santita. So in order to enforce these work requirements, you have to impose a new bureaucracy. Who's going to enforce this? How are you going to do this? This is rhetorical cruelty. He says, we're going to make you work. Many states already have work requirements. So make you work at what? Is this a new way to basically impose peonage? To say, if you get food, you must work?
Yes.
And I know you. Yes, and of course people should work if they can. But the fact is that many of these people are already working. They're working at sub-minimum wage jobs. They're working at jobs where they work 40 hours a week and they can't afford an apartment. I mean, I met a lady yesterday in an Uber coming home. I think we were actually on the phone. And the sister shared with me at a point in time that she was living in a shelter and driving Uber. And, okay, living in a shelter. So she's not making a living wage. And so, she relies on food stamps for something, not a lot. She said, I don't get very much. Okay, she's among the people that they would say you have a work requirement. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with mean people who, Tim Scott, like I said, we watched him, and he thought, we're going to make people work, we're going to fight for America. Well, dude, and he also is the antidote to racism. If you think there's racism, look at me. I'm a disruptor. No, you're a fool. But that's another story, and you don't name call. I did. But moving that right along to what would be cut, people's very survival. If you say level budget, more people, that's a concession on Biden's part. But McCarthy and his cronies are saying, no, we want to cut. Now, they haven't imposed a percentage, but the Congressional Budget Office said last week that if they couldn't basically do anything, the cut for non-defense spending across the board would be 22%. 22%. So think about it. You get a $1,000 Social Security check. Now you're going to get $780. That's what they're suggesting. Now, it's not going to be 22. It will be something. I hope that Brother Biden holds firm, but I don't want us to go into default. I agree with the brother who spoke before that this is all accounting mechanism. But right now, we have about 3 days to do this. So we're at the verge of having world reverberations. We already do. S&P is saying they're going to downgrade our credit score yet again. They did it in 2011 when we started with these shenanigans, and they'll do it again. And they don't care. They're basically doing a credit rating. They're saying, is the United States a good credit risk? And the answer for so many people right now is, oh, no, it's not. Because if you're having these public conversations, these are public conversations about whether or not we can pay our bills. Imagine, if you're having public conversations about what are those who are watching thinking? And would you invest in a company, a country that is having can we pay our bills or not? Oh, gee, I don't know. So the credit score should go down. I say that as a credit, from a credit rating perspective, as an economist from this country, I'm saying that would be catastrophic. We really got hit in 2011 when that happened. And people may not remember that. When our credit score went from a AAA to a AA+, which was a significant downgrade, and that downgrade caused interest rates to rise, because the better your credit is, everybody who's listening knows, the better your credit is, the better your interest rate is.
Why has it not been raised in all that time? Are we doing so? Why have we not been able to get back up to a AAA rating in all of that time?
No, we're back up to AAA rating, but S&P has said they're going to take us back down. It took us 2 years to get back up.
What did it take for us to get back up?
Showing that we could pay our bills. Essentially, showing that people could have good faith and credit in the United States. I mean, it took coming out of that legislative debacle and President Obama, frankly, drilling down and saying we're good for it and doing things to show that we're good for it. Now we're having a public conversation that suggests that we're not good for it. And what bothers me is that it's a public conversation. That that we're basically airing our dirty laundry before the world, and the world has heretofore depended on the dollar. But as we talked about before, this will be a factor in the de-dollarization of the world, because people are looking at the dollar. Really? Can we count on the dollar?
Well, I'm wondering.
And the answer is.
I'm just wondering, when I look at the Great Reset that everyone's talking about, the World Economic Forum, hey, you can say, you're sounding like a conspiracist. No, I'm not. I know, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. People have plans. The Great Reset was announced by Prince Charles on his Twitter feed. I didn't do that. And that came he did that for the World Economic Forum. I mean, it's almost like we're watching, I remember you saying about, you said Detroit didn't collapse, it was collapsed. I never ever forgot that, Dr. Malvo. And I'm watching, America's not collapsing. I'm like, is it being collapsed? Who does this? This is crazy.
But if you want to talk...
I've got 2 minutes, and Dwight, I'm going to get you on the other side of the break. But what now?
If you want to talk about conspiracy theories, the fact is that we have been co-conspirators in our own demise. We have used our racial distaste for the basically demographic shifts to punish the people who could very well save us. When we look at things that are hurting us, teacher shortages, labor market shortages, and you're looking at black unemployment. How do those two things exist in the same world? They exist because you're co-conspirators to your own demise. You would rather kill yourself than to allow those you perceive as the enemy to thrive. If we simply open up doors to black and brown people, hired people and paid them a living wage. Imagine if you paid all these unemployed people a living wage. What that would mean to our tax coffers. A question.
Well, absolutely. I mean, look, I heard my pastor, Reverend Clay Evans, say, I've never seen God make a mouth he couldn't feed. There is more than enough in this world for everyone to live well. Some people are going to be wealthier than others, but there's a floor beneath which no human being should fall. See, people forget that really miss that about Reverend Jesse Jackson's presidential runs. What he did was run on the policies. He made Dr. King's pronouncements policies, Dr. Malveaux. If I were president, this is this is the King vision, and this is what it looks like in terms of policy. And we need to understand that. Dwight McKee, can't wait to hear you. You had to respond to Andre, and I'm glad that you did, because you need to clear up what his misunderstanding about what you were saying yesterday about the Proud Boys. I mean, all this stuff is tied up. So I want you to call me. Bryce Green, Dwight McKee, and Dr. Julian Malveaux. Malveaux with an exclamation point, that is. And we're going to be joined by Mark Fancher in just a few minutes. I want to talk about about default. Yeah, we're on the verge of it. That's what they say. But 62% of the budget goes to militarism and war. Everybody else is facing a 22% across the board cut. But not the military. In fact, the GOP is trying to raise their budget. Give them more money. Call 8773-763-9278. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Okay. Dr. Malveaux and Bryce Green and Dwight McKee. Bryce, I hope you can stay with us a little while. We're on Facebook Live and YouTube, so everybody, talk to everybody. Hey, Susan Garner, how you doing? Okay, let me go back in these comments, because Dwight likes to hear them, but he does not. He's not on StreamYard, so he doesn't see them. There's so many. Good morning, George.
Santita, unfortunately, I do have to head off.
Okay, well, you know what? Could you stay till the other side of the break and give a closing thought?
Oh, certainly.
Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. And do you know Dr. Malveaux?
I do not.
You should know him, Dr. Malveaux. This young man is absolutely brilliant.
Well, hopefully I'll see him at conference.
Well, and he needs to be on your show as well. I got him from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. I will share your information with one another.
That would be wonderful. That would be absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely, and I really do hope that he'll be at our conference July 15th through the 19th, because that would be a treat. But he is absolutely brilliant.
Well, please send me his info, and I better count on me reaching out to you once I have the means to do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know you need to have Dwight on your show. I'd love to hear that debate. Ooh, love it. Ooh.
I love Dwight. I love Dwight's thinking, but we surely not on the same page.
Attorney Fancher's on.
It's just enough of the time.
That's the way it happens.
Oh no. Well, see, we cannot be a choir singing on the same tone all the time, because guess what? I think about W.B. Du Bois and the very ways that he approached black liberation. And the fact is that he moved from ideology to ideology as it served his purposes. Mm-hmm. And we have to be willing to do that as well.
And I think as you see different things, your thinking expands and changes. You see things and you say, you know what? Maybe so-and-so had a point. Or maybe, your thinking can evolve. If you just remain static in your thinking. My mother said, look, if you have the same friends today that you had 30 years ago, and these are the only people you know, well, you haven't grown. I said, okay.
You have not grown.
Yeah.
You have not moved.
You haven't moved. Said you keep on living. But it's Mark Fancher, you're there?
Yes, good morning.
It's wonderful to hear your voice. Bryce Green is going to be leaving us, but I'm going to get some closing thoughts from him as soon as we get on the other side of this break. and we are just a few minutes away. But we are talking on Facebook Live and on YouTube, the Santita Jackson Show page. Everyone, and please go to Twitter at Santita J. Wow. They do have an audio only feed, and that's what Ron DeSantis was on yesterday. Apparently, they had some technical glitches, but they probably crashed the system. They said only 250,000 people were viewing. Somehow or another, I find that hard to believe. But whatever they say is fine by me. That having been said, I want you all to call me at 773-763-9278. What do you make of the news that this report that 62% of our budget goes to militarism and wars? And the GOP answer to this created default crisis, because this is not even constitutional. We don't have to be in this position, everybody. This crisis has been created. 62% of our budget goes to militarism and wars, and we're scrambling for everything else. And part of that budget upholds Lockheed Martin and Boeing, because they're basically military contractors. That is how they make their money. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Hello?
No, that's Santita, but the fact is that these people have made money. We could go back to every war and see how even the manufacture of body bags was a profit center for them. And that they charged the government twice or three times as much as it costs to manufacture a body bag. So while we're talking about patriotism and fighting for America, the only America they're fighting for is the one they make money off.
Corporate America. That's who they're fighting for. And our soldiers get overseas and they see that. They see that they're protecting mercenaries. And they come back angry. And they should be.
Well, beyond that, when they come back, we look at military budgets basically blossoming, but our veterans who come back, and many of them black and brown disproportionately, come back and can't get their darn paychecks or can't come back and get the benefits they need. The number of military brothers and sisters who have not been able to get the kind of help they need is frightening.
And poor white
come
kids.
Back. Well, that's just, all of them. Well, all of them. All of them.
Yeah.
Come back and can't get what they need in terms of even what people have to do to document that they're disabled. You're walking around with one leg, and they're telling you, well, you're not quite disabled enough.
Well, wait, Dr. Malveaux. The fact that you have payday loan centers on the edges of these bases.
1 minute.
Because we don't pay the troops any money, y'all. The money's not going to them. And they're the ones who literally are putting their lives on the line. And they're putting their lives on the line for corporations. They believe they're putting their lives on the line for the flag. I am not mad at them. But when you go to these places around the world, American corporations are there. I know I've landed in these far off places.
30 seconds.
And they need Reverend to go talk to the president because they're having trouble with these progressive presidents who are sick of these neo-colonial tactics that American corporations bring in. And oh, by the way, that's what Putin was talking about yesterday. The neo-colonialism, he and China are going to
10 seconds.
Okay? They're going to break up neo-colonialism. Think
Stand
about
by.
that, y'all. Think about it. Stand by, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on the precipice of Memorial Day weekend. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow because in fact Memorial Day was started by newly freed African Americans. That's right, they saw that white soldiers had been put in mass graves without any honor. They dug them up, buried them individually, and had a ceremony to commemorate their lives into eternity. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow and about some of the celebrations that will be occurring in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Chicago. So everybody, call me at 773-763-9278 as we're looking at these budget cuts, as we're looking at default. 62% of our budget goes to militarism and wars. And the only segment of our budget that will not be touched, that will be increased by the GOP and quite frankly by war hawks in the Democratic Party, well, the only people who are going to be getting more money will be the Pentagon. Everybody else is getting a cut. What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278. Let's talk about this. In the meantime, let me get to some of these headlines. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis announced his 2024 presidential campaign on Twitter Spaces, breaking the platform, everybody, their audio-only platform yesterday. Technical difficulties, however, did not stop him from completing his announcement. In Russia, a new revolution, as CNN reports, could rock Russia if its war effort in Ukraine continues, according to the chief of the private military group, Wagner. He gave a scathing assessment of Moscow's military readiness in an interview with a pro-Russian blogger. The House will recess today for the Memorial Day holiday, even as tense debt ceiling negotiations between the White House and top Republicans continue. House Majority Leader Stephen Scalise says members will be called back to the chamber within 24 hours if a deal is reached. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 57 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 77 degrees, partly cloudy. In the NBA, will the Heat take it all tonight? Well, the Celtics kept their hopes alive, everybody. We're going to see what's going to happen. The Heat lead that series 3-1. In the NHL, it's over, everybody. The Panthers did it. Shut out the Hurricanes last night, 4-3. They are headed to the Stanley Cup Finals. Wow. Go Panthers. I love an underdog. In the WNBA, the Lynx will be facing off against the Mercury tonight. The Sky have the night off. In Major League Baseball, the Twins 7, the Giants 1, the White Sox 6, the Guardians nothing, and the Cubs 4, and the Mets 2. Hey, everybody. If you are a first-time home buyer, which means you have not owned a home in the past 3 years, I want you to hear this message, because even in these difficult economic times, you have an opportunity to own a home. Yes, even now, you have an opportunity to own a home, even if you haven't owned a home over the past few years, especially if you've not owned a home in the past 3 years. You need to call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID. They're your trusted local lender. First-time buyers made up 26% of the market last year. Those numbers continue to fall from 34% the year before, and the numbers were much higher in previous years. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have taken note of this. In fact, they're alarmed by it. And so they want to incentivize first-time home buyers, people who have not owned homes in the past 3 years, with substantially lower rates. So if you're in the Chicago area, for example, if your total household income is below $105,700, and you've not owned a home within the past 3 years, call Team Hochberg. You just might have an opportunity to own a home. You might qualify for these amazingly low rates that could be raised at any time, so you need to call them right away. 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, everybody. This is your opportunity to start generational wealth. Homeowners beget homeowners, beget homeowners, beget homeowners. So go on and do something for yourself, for your children, and your children's children. Become a homeowner. So everybody, call 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com and see what they have to say to you. Bryce Green, before you go, of course, we're joined by Mark Fancher, the illustrious Dr. Julian Malveaux, brilliant economist, Dwight McKee. Bryce Green, before you go, what to do? The GOP is pushing for a larger Pentagon budget, even as they profiteer. 1/4 of the budget of the military budget goes to contractors. They're getting rich. Our troops have payday loan centers at the edges of these bases. They don't have any money. The veterans get kicked around when they get back home. This is awful. But 62% of the budget goes to militarism and wars, even as we face default. And they're looking for more money. They're not looking for more money, but the GOP is looking to give them more money, and the war hawks in the Democratic Party. Help me, Bryce, before you go.
The reality of the situation, and despite all the rhetoric on either side, is that no one in the U.S. government truly cares about how much money we're spending and how much debt we're going into. What they care about is enriching their cronies, their donors, and their core constituencies of corporations and Pentagon contractors. We spend almost $1 trillion a year on the Pentagon, and yet people are talking about how we need to cut social spending. It's a neat trick. It's a neat rhetorical, operation. So it's easy to fool people when you use that sort of language. But the reality of the situation is that America knows that we can pay our debts, that we can fund social programs, that we choose not to. There's a reason that most of our military budget goes to private contractors. It's because those private contractors are able to buy the government and are able to integrate themselves into the military-industrial complex to force Congress, which is us, to enrich them. And that's the situation we've been having for since the end of World War II. And the only way that we can fight back against it is if we understand when they're lying to us, understand when they're just BSing about, oh, well, we have to cut spending because we care about fiscal responsibility. No, they don't. They care about cutting social programs because that's what empowers the people. What they care about is enriching themselves.
Bryce Green, everybody. Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you, thank you. Of course, Mark Fancher joined us. But we didn't hear from Dr. D on the other side about this. Because you had, one of the callers wanted to hear from you about yesterday, clearing up something, a misunderstanding about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. What do you make of this? 62% of the budget goes to militarism and wars, Dr. D?
Well, let me see if I can help you with this just a little bit. America is an empire, and they only have two exports. One is war, military operations, and the other one is dollars. And the reason you need so many military operations is because the role of the military is to force other people to use the dollar. The role of the dollar, as Bryce just said, dollars are illusionary. Money is illusionary. The only role of money is to control labor, control wages, and force people to use dollars to control their labor. And so anything can be money. Seashells used to be money. Salt used to be money. The word salary comes from salt. Salary means a surplus of salt. It's anything can be money. Money is an illusion, and that's why I think we get confused. Is because we think money is real. They print money, and money grows from trees. The only role, and now it grows from computers. The only role of money is to control the labor, so that in the role of the military is to make sure that you are forced to take the money. That's why the two go hand in hand. And that's why you have military bases all over the world. Wages are new. America's economy is not based on wages. The American economy was a slave system. So we didn't get wages. We didn't have salaries. We just worked. And then at some point we decided that we wasn't working for free, and so then money becomes introduced. So now you don't work for free, you work for the money. But the net impact is the same. It's who's ever in control is whoever prints the money and makes you have to use it in order to barter your labor and for goods and services. And so all of this talk about cutting services and cutting the military budget and all of that is a pretext in order to make sure that the money is in such need at the bottom that it will help people not have to renegotiate the price of labor. And the people in charge will make sure that we don't have enough money. We have just enough money then we're willing to work for basically free so we can do their bidding. And if we don't, the military will come in at the domestic level and say one or two things. Either you're going to work for this amount of money, you're not going to get this amount of money, or you're going to go to jail and work from there. You're talking about it the way empire works.
You know, bro, I mean, I give you about 70% of your argument, but I can't. But I think there's a historical distortion here, and but I'll give you about 70% of your argument in terms of extracting labor, because labor has been extracted from the beginning, and the thing on salary itself is absolutely correct. But at the same time, people were paid. They were paid substandard wages, but they were paid. The exploitation of enslaved people is quite different from the exploitation of indentured, and not only indentured, but historical immigrants. We brought immigrants to here so that we could exploit them, but they were paid. So we have to make a distinction between two things. They were paid.
They were paid from where, Melbo? Let me respond to this real quick.
Okay.
Paid from where, Melbo? There was no national...
Dr. Malvo.
Oh, all right, with Dr. Malvo. There was no... There was...
People who love me call me Malvo. My family calls me Malvo.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, point made. Now, there was a time that when people were getting paid the wages, who printed the money? Who was on the dollar bill before George Washington? Every bank printed its own money. Every bank printed its own money. And so there was no national dollar. There was no gold standard. His wages is just a means to an end. I mean, the money is just a means to an end. And so you have to really understand how economy works, which is basically based on a barter system.
Yeah.
Which is based. I'm not saying you directly. It's a economy historically is based on a barter system. It's not based on a wage system. I bring a cow, and you bring an egg. I trade your milk for my egg. I mean, that's how economy works historically. Money is just has been introduced, so that labor and barter can be controlled by a broader institution, whether it's a royal institution or whether it's a capitalist institution. But wages is really a product of capitalism, and Mark can probably speak to that better than I can.
What I want Mark
so
to do,
I'm going
to turn it over to Mark, and I want to find out, just generally speaking, I want your response to the fact that 62% of the budget goes to militarism and wars. 62% of the budget, 62%. And yet we're looking at social programs, the programs that not social programs, human programs. They're facing cuts of 22% across the board. Across the board. A lot of folks are not going to have enough to eat. A lot of folks are going to have to figure out medicine and all kinds of things. While the military, the GOP, now they're pushing for even higher expenditures in the military. They're pushing to give them more money. They get money they don't even ask for. Mark.
Well, it's certainly all infuriating, but I think that equally frustrating to me is our inability or unwillingness collectively to really understand and accept the reality of what we're dealing with. Because what we have is no option for getting out of that situation, given the current political system, the way it's structured and the way it works. When we approach this so-called debt ceiling crisis, so many progressive voices say the Republicans are responsible. What are we going to do about the Republicans? What are we going to do about the Republicans? We have to wake up and understand that it's not the Republicans, it's not the Democrats, it's both of them who are together part of an oligarchy that dominates everything. And what happens is that they run this charade every few years where the so-called Republicans come forward and say we're going to throw the country into chaos, and the Democrats cry crocodile tears, and they come, and then they go into back rooms and they work out these deals so that even if they reach an agreement, but still General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, Honeywell, all of these major defense contractors are still going to come out smelling fresh as a daisy, while the poor people, the working people, suffer because of cuts. And they work out these deals. The so-called Democratic Party is complicit with the Republican Party in working it out. And we, as dupes, stand back and say we're counting on the Democratic Party to stand firm and to protect the interests of real people. It's a charade and it's a joke. And if we don't have evidence enough from that, then we just look generally at how the Democratic administrations have performed. I mean, are we, as particularly African people in America, any better off under Democratic administrations? During the Obama administration, were police still not shooting us down in the street like wild animals? Under the Biden administration, was it not the same, or has it not been the same? Do we still have a school-to-prison pipeline program under those administrations? Do we still have mass incarceration under those administrations? Do we still have employment discrimination under those administrations? I mean, polite words are spoken, gratuitous statements are made about these problems, but there isn't any real focus on trying to address the real problems. And what many of us understand, especially on today, which is African Liberation Day, is that the answer to our problems is not found in either of these parties. The answer to our problem is found completely outside of the American system. The answer to our problem is found in getting the power that we need in order to impose on those who resist us, those who are our enemies, the will of the people, so that we are able to be truly liberated and to have a truly free existence on this planet. And the focus of our efforts really should be Africa itself, because Africa does control what would give us power. Africa has resources. It has oil. It has mineral wealth. It has timber. It has everything that the rest of the world needs. The problem is that Africa is dominated by some of the same people that we've been talking about, the major corporations, not just defense contractors, but multinational corporations from all over the place. They still dominate all of that stuff. And our agenda, our political agenda, should not be to elect candidates. Our political agenda should be to try and get that stuff for the benefit of the African world, not just people in Africa, but people of African descent everywhere. That's where our focus should be. And we don't understand that on a mass level, but you better be sure that the enemies of our people understand it very well. And some of these same defense contractors that we've been talking about are very much in favor of what the Obama administration is responsible for what the Biden administration has been responsible for, and that's for the militarization of Africa. They know what we could potentially do if we got control of Africa's resources. And in response to that, over the last more than a decade now, they have maintained what is called U.S. Africa Command, or AFRICOM, which is a very quiet, very stealthy operation that they have set up, where they have placed military installations and in some cases major military bases, such as in Djibouti, throughout the African continent, and every single African country almost, with a couple of exceptions, Zimbabwe being one, and if I'm not mistaken, Eritrea being another. And in these countries, AFRICOM very cleverly does not deploy U.S. troops to put down rebellions and resistance to domination of Africa's resources by Western powers. What it does is it uses proxy forces of the local African armies. It conducts training operations with them. It deploys them to go and to put down those who are creating any kind of disruption or chaos in the countries, to make sure that the resources continue to flow out of Africa and into the Western economies and into the coffers of the major corporations. And so they're making money off of Africa, which should be the source of our liberation. And they're doing it everywhere. I mean, even when we hear about what's going on in Ukraine, this is all part of disaster capitalism, where they go around the world creating all kinds of conflicts and military problems so that they can deploy the military, so that they can give great big contracts to all of these defense contractors so that they can go in and not only supply the weaponry, but after the country has been leveled, to finance rebuilding it, all to the tune of trillions and trillions of dollars. It's a disgrace. A disgrace not so much that they do it, but that we let it happen.
And the person who stood up against the establishing of AFRICOM on the continent, and all the leaders listened, was Gaddafi. And they killed him, and that's when AFRICOM was able to go in. We're going to bring on Dr. Max Wolf. Let's talk about America's wars and the U.S. debt crisis. There is a connection, everybody. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Stay here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're having a lot of conversations during the breaks. You don't want to miss it. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. And July 15th through the 19th, the Rainbow Push International Conference. We will be having conversations just like these at the conference, and you need to be there. Call 773-FREEDOM throughout the week, 773-FREEDOM starting at 9 o'clock today, and go to rainbowpush.org. Come on, get involved, everybody. And let's change the world. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. D-Ray, yeah, I can't say I was not a personal friend of Miss Turner's, but I'd met her on more than one occasion. Yes, I did. And Ike Turner. And I met them first when they were married. As I shared with you when we were in Africa at the Ghanaian celebration, Soul to Soul, which became a movie. It was the first time I got a chance to see Ike and Tina Turner and the Ikeettes perform live. And Dwight, they frightened me to death. At the end of their set, of course, they did Proud Mary, which I absolutely loved. It's like one of my favorites forever. And no one did that like Ike and Tina Turner and the Ikeettes. Nobody. And then all the smoke came up on the stage. So I thought there was like a fire. I was a child. Look, I wasn't accustomed to this. Because there was so much energy in their performance, and I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. Yeah, and I had seen James Brown perform, okay? Live.
Dr. Wolf is on.
Thank you. My mother would take us to the Regal. And so we could see little Stevie Wonder, right? She wanted us to see these people, and this is before we even had Expo, because she wanted us to be exposed. She wanted to put them somewhere in our memory, and I'm so grateful to her for her sensitivity. My mother's just brilliant, but everyone who knows her knows that. And, honey, when they went up in smoke, oh, gosh, I jumped in my mother's shoulder, because I was already almost as big as she was at 7. And I said, oh, she said, it's okay, this is part of the show. I said, oh, Mother, the smoke. She said, baby, it's part of the show. They have a very excitable performance. That's how she put it. Dr. Wolf, how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Oh, always. On Thursdays, we're glad to have you. We've got one of your colleagues, Dr. Julian Malveaux, with us, of course. And
hello, yeah. I know her nephew, I believe, as well, Jonathan.
Okay, that's right.
Great to hear your voice, Dr. Wolf. Always a pleasure.
And then, of course,
likewise. Hope you're well.
Dwight McKee and Mark Fancher. We've been talking about this as we look at the debt deal. Dr. Wolf, $1.1 trillion, 62% of the federal budget, discretionary budget that was spent on militarism and wars, and the ties between wars and the debt crisis. If you could just tell us what we're looking at, and if you think, is it too late? Because we're right up on June 1st, right? Is it too late to do anything? Because I've heard some talk about short-term default, long-term default, and everyone wants to stay on and hear you and talk to you. So, and Sweetie Pie, you're right, Nicole, she was an Ikeette. Wow. Oh.
Who was an Ikeette?
Well, Sweetie Pie. Remember the show on Oprah's network?
Oh, yeah.
She was an Ikeette, yes. She was an Ikeette.
I went to 2 Halloween parties dressed as Tina Turner.
Are you?
I don't know whatever.
I love your pluck. I'm not mad at you.
1 minute.
I gave my mother a heart attack when I was 13. I put a poster of Tina Turner on my wall. It was a shot that was strategically right up her thigh, And my mother came in. It was just just without words.
I don't want to ruin an icon for you, but Rudy Giuliani dressed up like your turn 3 or 4 times.
30 seconds.
They like to not talk about it now, but that guy spends a lot of time doing stuff that would get you banned from reading to a kid in Florida. I mean, he did it in public, it wasn't private.
I know. There are pictures of him with his lipstick on, but you're so wrong. You're so wrong. Max.
10 seconds.
Yeah, I'm not blaming Miss Turner. I'm not saying it's on her. I'm just saying it happened.
Oh, no.
Stand by.
Help us, Lord.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world.
You want to send me a text real quick so I can see what you're saying?
We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday. You know what time it is. It's time to talk with Dr. Max Wolf. That's right. So excited to speak with him about the debt ceiling, the debt deal, the debt crisis, default. Will there be a short-term default? Will there be a long-term default? Or will we just come to the edge and not have a default at all? Susan Garner wants to know, did S&P lower our credit rating again? Let me let you establish that first. As we look at $1.1 trillion, or 62% of the federal discretionary budget, spent on militarism and war, and the GOP is pushing for more, and hawks in the Democratic Party. But the S&P credit rating hasn't been lowered again. They've just said that they're considering it. Yes?
Yes. There hasn't been a downgrade, but there's something called a downgrade watch, or a watch, which says, hey, the present policy course that a government or a corporation is on is such that if they don't rapidly change course, they will go down.
Second caller.
That was the conversation that we've been seeing, right? So it is not, as such, a downgrade, right? But it is a sort of warning, perhaps not too shocking, that the present course of action would lead to downgrade, potentially. It doesn't have to be just one rung. It can be more than one if you're really kind of surfing down the stairs on your chin, which we're doing. I think maybe the better way to frame this is there's 2 ways that the government spends its money. One is that it decides to spend on this or that program, or this or that either discretionary or non-discretionary spending item, airports or the military or infrastructure or medicine or retired persons or veterans, or the list is quite long, right? The other way that the government spends money is to forfeit its ability to collect that money, and we call that a tax cut. Both of those things reduce the amount of money available to spend on everything and anything, right? The Republican Party has been fond of a strategy, which sometimes works, which is to cut the taxes, thereby paying back the donors. So there's the problem of having auctioning off your politicians, which we've mentioned here before, that one of the things people are usually willing to give you a lot of money to do is to give them even more money. Considered a good trade, it probably is, right? I give you $5, you give me 50. And you're often happy to do that if it's someone else's 50. So that's a little bit the problem of the form of government we find ourselves presently enjoying. So the Republican Party has been fond of cutting taxes and also spending money, just not on the same things. The Democratic Party has been nervous about raising taxes and willing to spend some money, right, on the things they care about. They both spend, and there really isn't a big difference in how much, despite the rhetoric. But the Republican Party is also interested in earning less as a government, right? So you don't need to be a genius. If this has happened at your house, if one of the main breadwinners decides they don't really like doing what they're doing anymore, or they don't want to be there that many hours, or the decision is made for them by someone else that they're not going to get so many hours, or they're not going to get to go back and get paid there, or whatever it is. If the income falls, it creates the same kind of stresses in the house, maybe even more sometimes, as prices rising. It has a similar effect. So we had these Trump tax cuts. You probably remember them. They were going to pay for themselves. I don't want anyone to crash their car with excitement because you're on the edge of your seat. Didn't work. Just like it didn't work the last 99 times we tried it. And every single person who's credible with an advanced degree studying this stuff, like myself, said, hey, this probably isn't going to work, just like it didn't work the last 99 times. And they told us, as they usually do, mostly nothing. They ignored us or told us we're wrong or we don't understand something. Always possible, but in this case, wasn't the case. So we find ourselves in a bit of a jam. We also did a lot of additional spending to get through the COVID scenarios, often blamed on Joe Biden by people who are not great at calendar reading, since a lot of that was pushed through under former President Trump. But anyway, a bunch was also done by Biden. Democrats and Republicans all voted for it. Republicans even had a good idea of lending money to themselves and their friends, which they didn't have to pay back. I might not need to spend a lot of time explaining it to you, but that isn't great for the budget either, called the PPP and other things. So, look, we have found ourselves in a situation. Again, 80 times we raised this limit. It's not a big deal. It's just politicized, right? This is hostage taking for news clips and social media videos at this point. However, when you reach the level of dysfunction that we're presently at, you're telling the world, don't trust us. We cannot manage our affairs. And that has real, deep, painful, impoverishing effects on the country. That pushes down our prestige. It weakens the appeal of our products. It puts on display the very worst of our dysfunction. And it makes people nervous about holding wealth in the United States. The only thing we have going for us is lots of other governments are putting on shows of vile ineptitude as well, so we have competition. Otherwise, it would be even worse.
I mean, so have we all? Yes, we've had Congressman Jonathan Jackson, your dear friend, on with us several times, and of course, known to everyone on this panel. And he said we've already taken a hit in terms of our prestige internationally.
Certainly.
Is that true?
No debating that. Yeah, not the first either, right? So this is another in a tough round here, but yeah. For sure, because when you were sort of the largest economy in the world, largest military in the world, a behemoth astride the global scene, you kind of need to a certain amount of confidence, and we can't get along. We keep shooting ourselves. We keep shooting each other in the streets and shooting ourselves in the face in Washington, D.C., be shocked to learn, may not jack up the confidence too much.
You know,
I mean, in these moments, America looks like an old gangster with a limp that it thinks is a strut around the world.
Santita, Max is so absolutely right. This public conversation about our ability to pay our bills, this public conversation, which the world is looking at with bated breath, whether S&P lowers our credit availability or not, it implicitly lowers our credit availability. So we were in 2011 in a similar situation. We went from the highest, a triple A, to a double A minus, or maybe it was a double A plus, whatever it was less. And this public conversation, they don't have to do anything. In the context of the dollarization, all we have to do is continue to be idiots and to let the world watch. It's like having a family fight in a public space. Who's going to trust us after that? Now
that's the key. That's the key. You don't have family fights in public spaces because you're not trusted. You're not trusted. Could you hold that right there? Because I have a lot of callers who want to weigh in. And I want them to, make comments or ask questions. Of course, Dr. Max Wolf every Thursday at 7:30 on this channel. But we are, of course, we have Dr. Malveaux. Malveaux exclamation point is her show. When is your show? I know it's on Mondays.
Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern. WPFWFM.org.
Okay. All right, everybody. And, of course, Dr. D, Dwight McKee, and Attorney Mark Fancher. Brilliant, all of them. Let me go to Jewel from New York. Jewel, what's on your mind, sweetie?
Good morning, Santita. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Just need you to come closer to the phone.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking my call. I was listening, and I was just wondering, with the situation at hand, is it possible they can get an extension to avoid catastrophe for American citizens that have been suffering so long?
Dr. Wolf?
I mean, they have sort of given themselves an extension because there's treasury management techniques, which have been employed now for several months under Secretary Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, that try to extend their ability to meet obligations. The issue with the extension, otherwise a very reasonable, practical suggestion, is the same body that can't agree would have to give itself an extension. And there is no inability. This is the really problematic area. There is no inability to pay this debt. This is completely fabricated. So in other words, if you tell the bank that you're not going to pay your mortgage until the banker comes to your house for dinner, you invite him 3 times, there's no extension other than the one you would get if you sought and were able to receive proper mental health care. Because the way the United States pays world obligations issued in U.S. dollars is to generate U.S. dollars, just to borrow money. They can borrow this money. There is no underlying inability at this time. It could come, right? There is no inability by them to borrow the money and instantly pay all these bills. There is no issue with that. However, doing this kind of thing will create a situation where they can't. And last thing they don't tell you is we already pay $500 billion in interest on our debt. When we do this, people become more nervous about lending to us because we're basically saying we have the money, but we might not pay to score political points with each other, right? Once you reveal this dysfunction, people will demand to be paid more at a higher interest rate for taking the risk of betting on you because you're basically saying, don't bet on me, I'm a bad risk. And people do listen to that. They say, oh, okay, you think you're a really bad risk. Maybe I think you're not such a great risk either. It makes a certain sense, right?
This is unbelievable. Let me go to Anita from North Carolina. Anita, very quickly, what's your comment or question?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
The governor here, Roy Cooper, is having a hard time with this military budget because he wants to make sure women have child care and that children have education so they will be able to work. So, and your brother has a term called test the lion. Somebody's test the lion about our budget, and we have to change that. And this is what I'm going to suggest, that your brother, who wanted education, Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. for everybody, Elijah Muhammad had a school after slavery to put in the role model of the male in the family when war or slavery took the males away. And there's nothing in the American system to allow for the family to come back together after war or slavery where there's a male in charge. Okay, so he did that so that the kids could go to school, and that if there are vouchers that Roy Cooper is talking about, I would like the Sister Clara Muhammad School to be in the south suburbs of Chicago.
Well, just very quickly,
in areas where
tie that to
there's males.
Okay, no, I think that there's something to be said about pulling the family together. I'm totally on board with that. But can you tie that to this debt ceiling discussion?
But the education, Roy Cooper is talking about giving vouchers out, but in the black community, there's nothing there to restore the male in the black family. They want us to go to white schools and white communities with vouchers, and that's not going to help the black community.
Okay.
So if they're giving vouchers out, they have to have a place to have those vouchers in everybody's community. You can't go over to another community to get educated and have nothing in your own. And Jesse Jackson Jr. was working on that.
All right, well, there's still work to be done. The struggle continues, and victory is certain if we continue with the struggle. Sending you so much love and happy Memorial Day. I love you, Anita. Ashley King from Memphis. Ashley, what's on your mind, sweetie?
I was just wanting to kind of push back on whoever it was. I wasn't sure.
Was it Mr. McKee you said?
I hate to disagree with McKee.
It's okay. He's ready for you.
I apologize.
He's ready for you. What? Come on now.
But he ain't ready for me.
Yeah.
He ain't ready for me.
He's ready for you. You ready for him?
The alternative, Dwight. I mean, what else can be done? I say that we throw our eggs in the basket with the Democrats and just try to reform the Democratic Party like Jesse Jackson Sr. did in the 80s.
Let me jump in here, Ashley. Reverend Jackson was never about the Democratic Party. And one of Reverend's early supporters, because when we came out in 83, we were all alone. Dr. Malveaux can absolutely attest to that. This was about to make America what it's supposed to be. This was about putting flesh on the bones of Dr. King's philosophy. What Reverend Jackson sought to do was make Dr. King's works presidential policy. That's what we ran on. A more just society, a more just society, and a more peaceful world. That's what we ran on. This was never about the Democratic Party. We ran under the Democratic Party banner because that's what was available to us, because Reagan occupied all of the Republican space, and we were never going to run as Republicans given what he stood for. So this was, I think I want you to get that in your head and understand that. Because I grew up in Chicago where the Democratic Party was absolutely oppressive. And Reverend had to fight the Democratic Party the whole, and he had to fight the Democratic Party the whole way. What you saw with
Jim, that was Mark's point, that was mine.
Mark made the point. Okay.
I was in '84, and the Democratic Party was lockstep against Reverend Jackson even running. I mean, one of the greatest flaws in our so-called democracy is the two-party system, because it really does encourage the kind of polarization that we're experiencing right now. Imagine that we had a European multi-party system that forced people to talk to each other and compromise. They don't have to do that now. So Reverend Jackson, I'm still very involved in PUSH. I'm the president of the board of PUSH.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And Rev is my friend, but he's also my hero on days when we ain't fussing at each other. So that's in there. On days when we ain't fussing at each other. But the bottom line is, let's not idolize the Democratic Party. It has been a block. It has been a block against progressive ideas, against black and women politicians who come correct. I'm so disappointed in Jamie Harrison, the chair, because he hasn't had the attempt, the courage that Reverend Jackson has. We have to really look at the Democratic Party. We got to do our best with them, but we also have to acknowledge that they ain't spit. I said spit, Santita. I didn't cuss on your show.
Well, thank you. But you know what? No, I think that, the thing is, you believe in God, you work with parties, okay?
There you go.
Just let the rest of that go. And my point is, whoever gets in office, you need, even if you don't get who you want, you got to get what you need. If you get who you want, you better get what you need, because the negotiation, you didn't give them your vote unless you did. But I told you the easy girl always loses in the courtship game. Stop that. Stop giving away your vote. Negotiate your vote. And then demand that the candidate, should they win, that they come through for you. Period. I don't get watery-eyed about anybody who's in elective office, including my brother. If I think that he does something, because my brother and the congressman are two different people. My brother, I give him my kidney, and guess what? He give me his. Boom. But he's a representative. So if I see something that I have a question about, I'm gonna ask. And I'm going to do it respectfully. And I'm going to do it respectfully. I'm not going to name call and all that, because I don't like that. I grew up with that. I grew up standing in the middle of crowds, and people didn't know that I was Reverend's daughter, and they would say the most horrifying things about him. So that kind of, I'm so glad I got that training early. I'm like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to make anyone feel that way. I don't want to do that. So, so Ashley, that's, I think that's what we have to begin to look at. We have to grow up in our politics. And I took that phrase from Dr. Wolf many, many years ago. We have to grow up in our politics.
Yeah, can I suggest?
Yes.
I am committed to this idea that the Democratic Party is the enemy of oppressed people, specifically African people, and it must be destroyed. And with no compromise, no pity, no mercy for it, because it is more devious than the Republican Party, in that the Republican Party at least lets you know they're coming. They're the wolf that bares its fangs and says, we're coming to eat you up. The Democratic Party approaches our people with smiles, with grand gestures, soothing words, and all of the things. And then when we come close to it, it knifes us in the back and devours us. It makes promises that it does not keep because it willfully lies. And so the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are enemies because they're part of the capitalist structure, which is designed to keep oppressed people, working people, communities of color, and specifically African people down. And we have to be clear on that fact. People don't like to hear that because they think we have no place to go, but we've got to develop a place to go because this is an empire, as has been stated earlier, and it is collapsing, and it is collapsing fast. It has deployed all of its resources overseas. It has left the domestic situation completely vulnerable and rotting at its core, and there's no way of reconstructing it, and it is about to collapse. We need to wake up and accept the reality of this and come out of this self-delusion that we have about the possibilities of reform. That ship has sailed. This is a dying empire, just as the Roman Empire died, just as every empire that has emerged on this planet has died. The time for the U.S. empire to collapse is almost here. And the only question is, are we going to be ready for it?
Well, let me ask you.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, Dr. Wolf, what do you think? I mean, is there space for reform?
Very hard to make. It's very hard to make these pronouncements with knowledge, right? So to say that someone who says that's wrong is also very hard. The truth is that every analyst of every type has accurately predicted about 400 of the last 2 empire declines, right? And that's not an indictment of their logic. It's just that there's a lot of things that are required, some of which we understand, many of which we don't, to keep up a global power structure. And there's a few number of things that can go wrong that are catastrophic, and then many things that seem large can collapse, and the empires can reform themselves. So it's very difficult from a prognostication perspective. I think the only thing I'd really argue with, other than to say that that's sort of a political position, a defensible one, not always mine, but I understand it and it's reasonable. I can't speak to the accuracy of it, but I don't think anyone really knows. I don't. But what I would say is that certainly big changes are required, right? And certainly there's a long pattern of disappointment here and very justified anger and difficulties with trusting that next time will be different if it hasn't been for a long time. I would say that a lot of the modern world order was built on the American empire. So if you did have a collapse of the empire, and I don't see that as impossible in any way, or imminent, by the way, I don't think either, but if you did, you're likely to have an orgiastic period of instability with mind-numbing violence as new empires fight to be the next empire, right? It's a little bit like those people who get confused when the gangster who's been terrorizing the neighborhood dies. That they have sweet relief until there's 10 people looking to replace that gangster fighting it out in the street until you get the younger, more aggressive version of that gangster. Structures probably matter more than individual groups, right? I think we kind of learned that over time, historically, just as the human race. So I think changing structures is a long, messy, difficult business and often unsuccessful, although maybe worth it. Changing the individuals in charge or even the groups in charge is relatively easier and usually profoundly disappointing. Right? So I think there's an issue there. And then in terms of the U.S. deploying its resources abroad versus at home, the only thing I disagree with that, I think we've become overly home-focused. We don't see much beyond our own shores here, and it hurts us. And there is a sort of mass story that is told about the U.S. empire, which I think is 100% factually inaccurate, which is that we spend all this time and caring for other people around the world, and we don't do it at home. We are even more brutal, generally, in smashing and grabbing what we want outside the U.S. than we are inside the U.S. So the benevolent America using its great might to help peoples on foreign shores is not a story that you can find a ton of historical support for.
Yeah, I don't agree with that either. What I'm referring to is the fact that manufacturing has been exported, and that to the extent that there's money spent on domestic populations, it is only to sustain on life support a dying empire. Because there is a recognition of the potential for people in this country to bring it down very quickly. The white working class is very militant and very aggressive, as we saw on January 6th. The thing about the white working class is they're desperately confused, and they don't know what to attack. They're hurting, and they don't know what to attack, and they've been at the mercy of demagogues who've completely misled them about who their enemies are. And the concern that those in power have is that if these people gain some degree of clarity about where their pain is coming from, then they're finished. And so they do spend money to keep them at a level where they're not completely enraged and that they don't come after the right enemies. But yeah, it's rotting at its core. And I think that really, we just ultimately have to rely on God to guide us through this, and our own intelligence and willingness and courage to face up to some realities.
Dr. Wolf, the last 90 seconds belong to you. Are we going to go into default? Yes, no, maybe, short-term, long-term?
Yeah, so we've already watched our government gleefully and willfully intentionally default on its basic duties to the American public. So that's already occurred. Do I think there'll be an actual debt default? No. I think we'll rescue it. And honestly, the short term is I think the big corporations have let the political situation go so far off the rails in order to get deregulation and tax cuts that they're going to have to come back in and fix it. And I think we might see a little bit of that with Mr. DeSantis down in Florida and with the Republican primary, right? Because the whole party has moved so far to the right now that you're kind of picking between the inmates in the asylum and the management in the asylum now, and you're usually better off with the management.
Stay tuned, everybody. While Congress is in recess, if they come up with a deal, Speaker McCarthy is going to call them back in within 24 hours so they can vote on it. But we've already taken a hit. So pay attention, everybody. Pay attention. We're going to get some closing thoughts from this magnificent panel, of course. Dr. Wolf, every Thursday here on the Santita Jackson Show. But I want to get some closing thoughts from you on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. And July 15th through the 19th, the Rainbow Push International Conference. You do not want to miss it. Call 773-FREEDOM or go to rainbowpush.org. I am Santita Jackson, loving you, loving you, loving you. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, Lord willing. God bless. Kenneth Rush, you say Mayor Harold Washington would never advocate leaving the Democratic Party. Of course not, because he was a Democratic Party guy. He was part of the machine. The problem was they kicked him out. And when they kicked him out, he ended up on the sofa of Lou and Georgia Palmer. Am I not right, Dwight McKee? They were real fired up black advocates. And they felt that there was something really special about Harold Washington, and they willed life back into him. But the Democratic Party kicked him out of the party and stripped him of everything, including his law license. It was awful. It was ugly. It was ugly. So when he finally got to Congress in 1980, he was like, I'm going to hold on to this. And when we had the boycott of Chicago Fest and said, no, Harold, you need to run for mayor, he was not happy. He said, yeah, you want me to register 50,000 votes, get me $100,000. Got $200,000 from him and registered more than 100,000 people because the headquarters was Operation Push. I'm simply saying to you, I'm a registered Democrat, and I'm an independent Democrat, though, because I am. I believe in God. I work with parties. Everything else, I only believe in God. That's it. Okay? I got to work on belief in myself. Okay?
The brother who said alternative spaces, create alternative spaces, what is he talking about? I like to know. I am a yellow dog Democrat. I will never vote for a Republican unless you cut my finger off. But the Democratic Party is woefully flawed. Where would you go, brother, who says create alternative spaces? Give me something.
Are we talking about Mark?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I can respond to that. Yeah, here's the situation that I think that African people have always been in. That we've always been born into a situation where we have two parallel struggles that are going on. There's a struggle for survival, and there's a struggle for liberation. And they run parallel with each other, but they're separate and distinct. And when we are struggling for survival, we do anything we can in order to make it from day to day. And so that, in a political sense, may mean that we do work with the Democratic Party in order to survive from day to day. But where we make our error, in my view, is that when we begin to conflate the two struggles, we begin to confuse the struggle for survival with the struggle for liberation. The Democratic Party does not provide us with a pathway to liberation. That has to be done elsewhere and in other ways outside of the existing system. And we can't deceive ourselves and think that if we put all of our resources and energy into the Democratic Party, that that's going to lead us to liberation. If we're going to struggle for liberation, we really have to think, quite frankly and honestly, about a revolutionary struggle. And that does not mean running out and picking up rifles and taking to the bush or to street corners. But it does mean working and organizing in ways which are completely outside of the existing system over the long term in order to establish a realistic prospect for us to gain some degree of independent power that is not dependent upon all of these bosses who have been controlling our movements and our lives for as long as we've been in this country.
And Mark, I can say this, because you hit it right on the point, right on the head. And that's what this game is about, is this whole pretext to cut the budget. They're going to cut our little money to put us back into survival mode. Whenever we talk about liberation, and whenever we're on the brink of dealing with real liberation, then they cut the money at the bottom to put us back into survival mode again so they can maintain control. Money is about control. There's no way America can default when you can print your own money. Let me do it again for you. When you can print your own money, there is no concept of default. Because if you need more money, you just print more of it. It's all the pretext to control the masses, mostly us. And so whenever we seem to have a momentum going, they do this whole little game like they're doing today and say, well, let's make sure that we keep them on a government wage economy and cut it at such a point as now they're desperate and now we can control the process.
Ooh. Well, I tell you what, I want to get some closing thoughts from everybody here. Dr. Will.
I mean, in economics, there's a name for this, right? There's an this is an engineered fiscal crisis.
Do you think that's what this is?
We have I don't even think it's an interesting debate. Now, look, there are real fiscal crises, which we're doing nothing about because we don't care about them. So the fake ones, we do, right? So, yeah, it's not real until it is, right? So, like, if there's no one in your house chasing you, who's the devil, but you think there is, and you start shooting in that house, and I live in that house, I got a real problem. Whether there's a devil there or not, right? Because I'm going to get shot in the face, right? So, like, yeah, it's real, but there's no devil in the house, right? Or at least the one you see isn't there, right? So, I mean, like, I don't know how to describe it, but I don't even think it's interesting. Like, when I sit around with other professional economists, I know, frighteningly boring concept, but when we do, we don't spend much time on this because there's nothing to spend time on, right? There just isn't something there, right? Now, there's a lot there. There's a lot going on. And I think the two things maybe we don't want to talk about, which are interesting, is it appears sometimes, it's probably just the appearance, but it appears that we now may have people in our senior political leadership who are directly or indirectly taking resources from foreign states interested in seeing the weakening of the United States. That's pretty big. I'm not sure why we're not discussing that. It seems to be that we now have mounting evidence to that. I think that crowd would probably rather not talk about that. I understand that's kind of a big issue. I also think we've reached a point here where there are just sort of gangsters running large swaths of American politics. And, we see that any number of different ways here, but we have people who fake their credentials, who have no credentials, who are unambiguously unhinged. We have a lot of people in senior leadership who don't have the mental stability to work the night drive-through window at a Wendy's.
Where do you think we're going
that's
with
probably
this?
A hard job.
I mean,
but it shouldn't be Yeah.
But Matt,
I'm
what
looking
is
forward
this?
to President Santos. I think it'll be exciting. I don't care where he was born or what his real name is. I'm just real excited. I'm excited for the drag shows if he brings them back. As long as there's no reading, I'm fine with them. No reading and no history books. Yeah, I don't know, but Ron DeSantis looks like a right-wing populist everywhere else in the world, and people discuss it. So I'm not sure what he's doing, but it also looks like you can buy the governor of Florida if you're Elon Musk, and the last 3 things you bought didn't work out. There are some things that are a little unsettling, like, we would have made fun of these things in impoverished Central American countries 20 years ago, and now they're just the nightly news. That's pretty unsettling to me, which doesn't mean I'm in love with every aspect of the old order or anything like that, but I don't know. As a student of history, disorder is usually worse than a bad order.
Explain.
People get excited about fighting the devil they know, myself included. I get it. But the period between stable regimes is usually blood-drenched, and it often makes people desperate for a strongman type, right? And then they pick one. So to me, that's always the lesson. That's why the selection of Trump portion of the country is interesting, right? They like him because he's unfit for office, not despite it. They like him because they are desperate and they don't think they can get ahead unless they get behind like a radical despot type, right? Mm-hmm. And they've already learned that salvation lies in pretending to be rich and aping the habits you think rich people have, because that's how you get poor people to buy more than they can afford, which is a lot of American culture, right? I understand that. But to me, the lesson of history that I find interesting, I guess I come from a weird group of people who've had a long sweep of being thrown out, not well loved by their host nations. They move around a lot. So it's a fair amount of observations for a living memory of a family, I guess. When I was a kid, my grandma used to say, you probably will die in the country you were born, so don't get so attached to it. We often don't, our people. So, that's a perspective. Doesn't mean it's always true, but it's a perspective. It's interesting. It's a different view of the world maybe than you always get from everyone here. But, yeah, it looks to me like more sort of scary than a bad plan is no plan. I feel like we have no plan. We're in no plan time. Like, we got a guy in the back seat with us talking about other people are bad drivers, and there's just no one driving the train. And so the traditional kind of power structure takes over and tries to take care of itself. I think the Disney-DeSantis fight is interesting there. I think we're missed the other thing that we should be talking about as a country, too, which is the war in Russia showed us that corruption crippled one of the world's most mighty superpower military machines, rotted it out to the core. If you're another superpower locked in struggle with that superpower with a less severe but significant version of a corruption problem, I think I'd be talking about that a little more. Because that looks, like a lesson of history right now. And then last piece is, show me any group of people whose life is coming to an end, and I'll show you a group of people who think the world is coming to an end. That just means you're unsophisticated and your way of life is collapsing. And there's a whole lot of Americans who think the world is coming to an end. I think we're way past time ignoring that.
So what is the impact of people thinking that the world is coming to an end? They don't care?
And they decide it's out of their hands and they give in to the indulgences they knew better than to give into before. Right? That's the risk. If you don't have a future, it's real hard to build for one.
What did Chris Christopherson write? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And me and Bobby McGee. Wow. Well,
I also think there's reason to be hopeful, though. This isn't like a sort of fade to black catch on my part, although it might sound that way. I also think the younger generation of people here is willing to give up the inducements and bribes that made people acquiescent in the past. And that makes them potentially really interesting change agents, right? If you don't covet the home ownership so much, and you don't covet the car so much, and you're not tied down by traditional beliefs about what men are supposed to do or what women are supposed to do or who's supposed to go on a date with whom, all those distractions, you might have the space and the inclination to start making real changes that would be beneficial, I think, to other people. And we also have a countdown clock, which is we've probably raped Mother Nature to the point of real trouble here. And so we also have to, ironically, we're at a moment where people don't function well in groups of larger than one, and we're at a historical moment where they have to function in really large groups, environmentally and politically, to come out the other end of this tunnel.
Well, everybody, I want to get
Santita,
Yes?
I've got to...
But I want you to...
Julianne, I've got...
Can you give us a closing thought, Dr. Malvo?
Sure. Well, first of all, this has been a really productive conversation, especially about the debt ceiling. But understand, despite all that my colleagues have said about conspiracies, et cetera, if we default, it's real. And it's going to trickle down to people who are basically depending on their SNAP. The Farm Bill will not be authorized. Sure. We can just go down the list. There's so many things that are going on. I encourage people this weekend to call their legislators if they're at home, to go see them. If you're in Republican districts, because the margin is so slim, to tell them, stop the BS. Do not allow this to happen. McCarthy is dancing on a thread. He's dancing on a thread. Anybody can call him out. Any Republican can call him out. Is there a progressive Republican in the House who's willing to call him out and say, stop it, dude? Because basically people, we get talk conspiracy theories, and like I said, I give Dwight 75%. I ain't going to give him 100. I give Max 80%. I'm not going to give him 100 either. The political reality is whatever we think about conspiracies and long-term, there's a short-term crisis that we have to deal with. Folks, get in touch with your legislator. If you have a progressive Republican, tell them 2 Republicans can stop this BS. 2. And they're got to
it's Dr. Dwight. Dr. Malvo is Dr. Dwight to you.
Oh, y'all stop.
Well, Dr. Dwight, it's whatever to you, since you chose to disrespect me first.
Wait. You all stop. Hold on. Now, whatever issues... No. Wait. No, stop. Hold on. You know how we do things here. We disagree without being disagreeable, and we're going to always be respectful. Wait, y'all. This is the Santita Jackson Show. We're going to do things the way I say they're going to be done. And whatever you all do offline is on you. But the way we do things here is the way I say things will be done. And whatever can be settled will be settled offline. And that's the way that's going to happen.
I am just playing.
Dwight, I've known you since I was 2. I know you're playing, and you play a whole lot. I got you. I didn't meet you yesterday. Everybody stop. I got you. I know, I understand, but I know Dwight jokes a lot. I know he would never disrespect you. First of all, you're too valuable to the struggle, and you're too esteemed by people, starting with Dwight. You're too valuable for people to disrespect you. I know, having known him and having known Dwight's mama and daddy, and his sister used to babysit me, and I was a flower girl in her wedding. I go way back with him. I know disrespecting you is something he would just not do. He just wouldn't. But I want you all to settle that, so that because I think that both of you have powerful voices, and I can say to you as a woman, I can only imagine the hoops. Just what the walls you've had to scale within the Black community, within the broader community. It's just been hard for you, and I acknowledge that, accept that. I know when people hear about your credentials, they go, "Huh, you?" MIT economist, yep, all of that, and that's why I have my board ops. I give everyone people's handles, and I said, don't call anyone by their first name. I'm from the South. My family are from the South. You don't call someone by their first name until they give you permission to do so. So let's stay right there, and everybody, I love you. Is Mark still there?
Santita, I truly have to go. I've got some folks on the other line.
No, I'm going to let you go.
I haven't with the brother at some point in time. I don't like what went down, and I don't like
No, we're not going to do that here. And I'm going to connect you all offline, and you all are going to work it out. I know that you will. We're still on Facebook. So that's how we're going to do
All right,
that.
take it.
Love you. All right.
Thanks, all. Always appreciate learning from you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Love you, Max. And Thea.
I'm willing to agree it's my fault. Seems to always work in my house. It might work there, too.
Oh, what's a happy wife, happy life? It's my fault. That's right, dear. Yes, dear.
So they say. So they say.
So they say.
Wouldn't know. Wouldn't know.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, Dwight, Mark, Max, do you want to say anything real quick before you go? Because I know you're running.
I know. I mean, look, I think these are important. I don't think there's a solution to the evolution versus reform debate. At least no one's found a good one in the last 150 years or so. But I think it's a debate you have to have. And if you don't have the voices pushing for revolution, there is no hope for reform. So those voices are key, even if you don't always agree with them on every point.
Well, Dwight McKee, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, Jesus said, they talk to Jesus about taxes. Jesus said, show me the coin. Whose face is on the coin? Is a Caesar. He say, well, render what's Caesar's unto Caesar. Render to God what's unto God. What he was saying is that money is about control. And that you have to decide who's going to control your life, Caesar or God. You have to decide that whoever, because they have money, does mean you have to be subjected to that. And so my whole point is that money is just a means to an end, and is a means of control. And when you have the capacity to print your own money and put your face on it, as your daddy used to say, then it gives you the capacity with a good military to maintain control. And so the reason I always agree with Mark, and I think Professor Wolf is a genius, is that in an empire which is struggling to maintain control, which is now have to compete against other new empires like China and Russia, who is looking to wrestle that control and create a new world order, we're just kind of pawn in a bigger game. And so once we understand, what we first have to understand is a game being played that does not have anything to do with democracy, does not have anything to do with our benefit, our welfare. It is where we fit between warring empires. And so I think once we understand that, at least gives us a legitimate point of view to know how emotional to get invested when they create these pretexts. And that's why I was interested in hearing that Dr. Wolf saying it's not even that serious to us because we understand it's all a game.
Well, there you have it, everybody. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Oh, Susan, thank you. Which is such an enlightening show. Well, hey, with the people who I bring onto the show, how can you not get enlightened? I get enlightened every time. I learn so much from Dr. Wolf and from Dr. McKee, Dr. D, and Dr. Julian Malvo, and Attorney Mark Fancher, and Bryce Green, and just all of the people who make this show what it is. I just want to bring you all the best information to which I have access. And just, there were other people who, we couldn't get them on the show today, but we will do that so that we can talk about, so that we can frame these discussions, I think, in another way, give you something else to think about. I'm not going to say I have it right 110% of the time. I don't. But I just try to give you some more thoughts, something else to think on. Yes? So I love you, everybody. Thank you, Nicole. I'm glad you enjoyed the show today. Everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. And as you look at this debt ceiling, as you look at this debt crisis, know that it is manufactured. We don't have to be here. Know that the only people who are not being asked to give up anything are the military and the contractors who get a fourth of that budget, while our troops, our active troops, are in poverty. You have payday loan centers on the edges of bases all over the country because they don't make enough money. They don't make anything. Think about that. Our veterans, when they come home, they're put in the trash heap. It's shameful. So, we have
By the way, it's their benefits, the VA benefits and veteran benefits, will be cut immediately on a default. among other things. But lots of talk about veterans on the Republican side of the aisle. All those payments go to zero temporarily during a shutdown from a default. Just one of many points, not maybe more than any other groups that are hurt too, but it's a bit surprising we don't hear that kind of coming up more in these debates.
I mean, at all, Max. I mean, how they will suffer. I mean, at all. Nobody's talking about that.
Also, sitting around waiting to see if the plug is pulled on your economic lifeline is itself a torture for people, even if it doesn't get pulled in the end, right? Just watching this and watching people flirt with the sort of cord attached to your economic respirator for political gain is itself an impact and a negative one in a lot of lives. Huddled over a lot of kitchen tables, sweating, right?
That's right. That's right. To put people through this, it's cruel. It's cruel, but it's designed to break you down so that they can impose peonage, make you work, and make you feel badly about not working. Nobody's giving me anything. I mean, when you look at Clarence Thomas, he's a tragedy. He hates affirmative action because nobody gave me anything. No, son, people marched and died and bled and died for you to have the opportunity. You're not the first smart Negro ever born. You're the first one with opportunities. That's why whenever I hear about the first and the only, it irritates me. And it irritates me because you act as if Frederick Douglass was not qualified to be president of the United States. You act as if the first people who we've seen to get anything after all the marching and dying that we have done, you behave as if, being the first is something to be applauded. I mean, it's something to be acknowledged, but applauded? You need to applaud Amelia Boynton, who reached out to Dr. King and said, you need to get to Selma. Yeah. Cotton Reader, people you don't even know, people you walk right on past, they are the heroes. They are the miracles. Everybody else is the blessing. Dr. King is the miracle. Medgar Evers is the miracle. Jesse Jackson is the miracle. Obama's your blessing, one of them, and Bernie's a blessing. But Bernie's also one of the people who marched and almost died and got slapped in the face by someone who felt that he was being traitorous to Jewish people because he supported Reverend Jesse Jackson in 1983. No, he didn't get slapped, he got punched in the face by a lady, and he kept on talking. Y'all, let's grow up, and let's disagree without being disagreeable, and let's understand that nobody's going to win until everybody does. And I didn't say take all the marbles and go home, but we all win together, or we all perish together. It is that simple. God promised you a seat at the table in the presence of your enemy, because your enemy is God's child too. So come on, everybody. It's okay to be right. To be damned right means you are damned first. Stop it. Stop it. Let's move up. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Sending you much love, Dr. Wolf and Dwight McKee.
Thank you.
And Alex, thank you for a great show. Oh, my goodness. I'm always feeling so good. There you go. Alex is, boy, he has been learning and getting greater every week that I'm with him. Sending you so much love. Because he literally got dropped into the show. And I just love him to pieces. So, I love you. That's right, Susan. We will all win together or we'll perish together. It's that simple. It's that simple. That's one of the lessons I learned when I pledged my sorority. Either all y'all make it or none of y'all make it. If someone drops a line, then you have failed. Because you're supposed to save everybody. You know, my mother didn't look and say, I've got one too many children. She just chopped up that chicken. Just a little bit finer, okay? My mama said, look, when your father and I had each of you, we couldn't afford any of you. But we figured it out. Everybody can win here. And everybody did win. Just took a little bit of sacrifice, that's all, and some respect. And more than that, love, because love changes the whole dynamic in the room. I didn't say like, because you're not always going to like somebody, but to love somebody. When you love somebody, you begin to understand somebody. And you begin to embrace. That's why all these biases and prejudices and racism and all this other foolishness, I can't buy into that, and I don't want it. Y'all got it. If you want it in your life, great. You don't want to marry someone because they're of a different color, religion, whatever, be my guest. As hard as love is to come by in this world, God bless you. I think it's wrong-headed and nuts. I really do. I think you're losing out by not having people in your life of different backgrounds and really trying to get along with people with whom you might have some disagreement. You're going to learn something from somebody. Even Tina Turner said, you know what, why not? She said it in a Larry King interview more than 20 years ago. Well, you know, you're an icon, not just musically, but you are an icon because, you know, to women. She said, but you know, and I guess it makes all that I've been through makes sense to me now. Because if I hadn't been through that, I wouldn't be able to inspire these women with my story. And she also wouldn't have had a show, because whatever you think about Ike Turner, she did his show until she died. Whatever you think about Ike Turner, he was the first person to record a rock and roll song, according to Wikipedia. He is that. He's one of the cornerstones of rock and roll. And she became the queen. Whatever happened between them is between them, and that is their business. But the greatness that they created together, the greatness she continued to create, honor that and keep it moving, because you don't know anybody's story. You know the story that's been allowed to be told. You don't know anything. We don't. I love you, everybody. So, let's keep it moving. I love you. Have a great one. Let me turn this off. I love y'all. I'm going to